It's Tuesday, August 19th. Welcome to Scouting the League. We are 1 week away from cutdown time, one of the worst few days of the year for scouts in the building and even for scouts on the road, when the rosters must go from 90 down to 53, and so many of the players that you were pulling for end up getting that tough call. I have been there. I have made the tough calls to both players and agents, and it can be a brutal few days. So, how does it work and how do teams get there? Find out today here on Scouting the League. Before we jump in, though, let me remind you to like, subscribe, and share this podcast wherever you are watching and listening, whether it's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or over on YouTube with that video portion. Give us a like, give us a subscribe. Thumbs up, comment, and most importantly, share it with a friend. Get it to somebody else who loves football, wants to find out more about this process. Give myself a follow. I am Rodrik David at RightStepADV on X. RSAFootball.com is my website. That is Right Step Advising, where I am working to help you, no matter whether you're an agent, player, school, or anywhere in between, make that right decision as you take that right step forward. Our co-host for our long format podcast, Neil Stratton, is at Inside the League. Give him a follow as well. Check out his website, InsideTheLeague.com. And give our home over at ProFootballInsiders.com a follow. They are at pro_FB_insiders. Make sure you're checking out all our other episodes, our archives, and our guests. Fascinating conversations with Eric Galco of the East-West Shrine Game, as well as Drew Fabinias, as we talk top 300 players and the Senior Bowl. Annie Duke talking cognitive psychology and thinking in bets, as well as Jordan Reed with ESPN, continuing to roll the guests in. More and more requests to get on and talk ball with Neil and I. A really fun time as we get into the season. But one of the brutal things about the cut down time, about getting to preseason, is making those phone calls to players that really are trying to achieve their lifelong dreams. As we get to preseason 3, most, if not every team, is playing with 90 guys on their roster. We used to go cut downs from 90 to 75, then 75 to 53. All that, of course, has changed. It is a full boat of 90 players all the way down to 53 before you can bump back up and get those 16 players on the practice squad. With preseason games happening Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, we could see cut downs happening as early as Friday and Saturday. The bulk of those will happen those Saturday, Sunday, and then Monday. Perhaps you even have a few tough decisions to make Tuesday morning. Tuesday at noon, you have to be down to 53. And then even then, you'll have a little bit more maneuvering as teams have trades and roster claims, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. Getting from 90 down to 53 is a heavily GM and head coach driven process. You will get some veteran high level evaluators in on some decisions. But again, as we've talked about on this podcast, again, really 45 to 48 of those roster decisions have already been made. So you really only have conversation on a few of those players. After that, it really comes down to positional numbers. When you start thinking about that 53, start writing down and you can adjust them from there. Special teams, you're going to have 3. You're going to have your kicker, your punter, and your long snapper. Designate those 3 specialists, and you are off to a good start getting to 53. And then after that, that leaves you with 50 players. And again, started at 25, 25. 25 on offense, 25 on defense. You're typically talking about 3 quarterbacks, 5 wide receivers, 3 tight ends, 10 offensive linemen, and 4 running back and fullbacks. Again, depending on your offense, depending on your philosophy, maybe it's 3 running backs. You take that fullback spot, give it to that tight end group. Maybe you're only going to carry 2 tight ends, bump it over. We're going to be a heavy wide receiver offense, keep 6 of those guys. The numbers will move around a little bit, or perhaps the offense and defense will be a little bit more heavily skewed, 26, 24, 23, 27, something like that. Over on the defensive side of the ball, depending on how you designate positions, what position groups, you're talking 10 defensive linemen. That's including your edge rushers, your defensive ends in that group. You got your bigs on the inside, your edge rushers. Again, you're talking about 5 linebackers. Again, whether maybe one of those guys is a bit of a hybrid guy, but you're thinking more your inside linebacker types. and then split your secondary 5-5, 5 safeties, 5 corners. Again, that is always going to be skewed a little bit more, probably corner heavy. One of those guys that cross trains a little bit. So you may be 6 corners and 4 safeties. But again, you're looking at 25 on offense, 25 on defense, 3 special teams, and that will get you to that magic number of 53 as you continue to work through your positional battles. As we've talked about, look at your special teams core 4 units, kickoff, kickoff return, punt, and punt return to start thinking about who you need to keep at a position. Many times you maybe want to be a little bit lighter at your inside linebacker and linebacker group, want to be maybe a little bit heavier at your edge rusher or your safety corner. Again, you've got to have numbers that will allow you to function on special teams. That's where your special teams coach is going to be the one coach that will be thoroughly a part of this process. Got to make sure you're too deep on those core 4 units is going to have enough players in these different spots to hold up against what you're going to see early on in the year and throughout the year. So again, those special teams on your core 4 are going to be a big part of those conversations. The other thing that you're really going to think about when you start thinking about those last 3 to 4 position battles is those priority positions. Your offensive tackles, your edge rushers, and your trait guys that eventually have a chance to be players in the NFL. Again, it is rare that you end up subjecting your offensive tackle that needs development to the waiver wire because you don't want that player getting poached. That is a very common one for teams to stick on the back end of their roster and have inactive for 16 or 17 games of the year. I experienced a young man named Matt Gano, raw, trait-driven offensive lineman. We in Atlanta knew that if we ended up on the waiver wire, he was probably going to get claimed. You keep him on the 53. He's inactive every week. He's not going to be able to contribute this year. But again, down the road, he is going to. Matt did a little bit, struggled with some injuries in Atlanta. But again, he was a guy, as soon as that type of player ends up on the waiver wire, he is probably getting claimed. Offensive tackles, those are the big ones. Your edge rushers with traits, length, explosiveness, need some refinement. Those are players you really end up keeping on your 53, even though maybe this year they may never play a defensive or offensive snap. Maybe they'll get some special teams and maybe they'll be an inactive. But again, you don't want to stick that player through the waiver process and allow other teams to claim that contract without you ever having a chance to make it through. So again, those priority positions, offensive tackle, edge rusher, those are the 2 big ones that you don't want to subject those players to. As we get closer to Tuesday of next week at noon, you can start thinking about those trades as well. And those trades, not always driven by, hey, we really think highly of this player, but we don't want to potentially sit and wait in the waiver process to try to claim this player. And that is how you leapfrog some of these other teams when you're maybe lower down in the 20s. You're a good team, a playoff team. It's unlikely that 20 teams will pass on claiming this player. Let's go ahead and give up maybe a conditional 7th or a conditional 6th to make sure we just kind of leapfrog those teams. That is the most often thing you see with some of these players. Hey, yeah, we knew they were going to get cut from that other team, but we didn't want to sit and wait for in the waiver process to grab this player. Yes, they're going to get cut. No, we couldn't sit and wait. So again, that's always one of those other big things. And the roster claims, again, that is one of the additionally hard things as we talk through the process of what a cut down looks like is some of these guys that think they initially make that 53. Well, they did, but all of a sudden you made a waiver claim and it's, somebody's going to be the casualty of that waiver claim after the 53 is made. Got to have another roster spot. They get that late call on Tuesday or Wednesday after you've been rewarded somebody. Hey, thanks, you made the 53. Now you get to go through the waiver claim and we sit around and find out where you're going to be. Of course, you have all your PUP and IR moves as well. Again, for those IRs, have to make it through on that initial 53 where you can be bumped over. And with the different PUP designations, physically unable to perform, that is going to keep you where you're at. So what goes into the process for NFL teams and NFL scouts? Like I said, it can be a brutal couple of days. Not fun to be a part of it from a pro standpoint, but absolutely part of what goes into the job duties. For most NFL teams, the players are prepped prior to that preseason game. Hey, following the game, stick around, stay close to the NFL city, be at your apartment, be within a half hour to 45 minutes. There's always going to be players that kind of ignore you. Again, I remember calling the guy, he was 3 hours away. Well, hey, it's going to be a long 3-hour drive for you because you need to come in and meet coach, meet GM, whatever it may be. Players are prepped. Agents should also be doing some prep. Prepare your guys, regardless of how likely or not. Again, tell them stick around, be professional. It could happen. You never know. It's the NFL. It is not for long. It is the no fun league. Whatever abbreviation you want to put on it. It is a tough roster to make a 53. So if you're an agent, prepare your guys, have them ready to go for the process because again, it can be brutal to call guys who have not been prepared or didn't think they need to be prepared. Again, it just is that much more emotion during an emotional process. So how does it work? Again, we'll say Saturday morning. We played a Thursday night game. Friday, we had meetings all day. Saturday morning, maybe we're going to go from 90 down to 75. We're going to get our 15 players. We're going to get those guys called. Usually, pro scout, pro director is going to be given a list in the number order. Hey, start calling these guys in this order, get them into the building. From there, you're going to have 3 or 4 bullpens to hold them. That phone call is, pretty short and easy. Hey, so-and-so, need you to come in, bring your playbook. I'll meet you down here. Most players know what that means. There's not going to be much fighting, not much question asking. Again, as a scout, whoever's making that phone call, you don't want to diverge much on the phone because, again, you don't know what's going to be said by that GM or head coach in the meeting. That player is going to get to the building. You try to kind of keep them by themselves. You don't want a bunch of extra people talking to them. They're going to walk into a meeting, fairly short meeting with a head coach, GM, get to a position coach, and then they will start their checkout process. It is a tough process to be part of. Some of these guys you've gotten close to. Some of these guys you've been scouting for a while. Some of these guys maybe you signed during a pro workout at some point. So it is players that you have perhaps gotten close to, that you were rooting for, pulling for, but ultimately just didn't have enough to make the 53 at that time. Again, for those first 15 players, it's usually the writing's on the wall. It's understood. And those players are likely going to be sent home from there. Again, those are not the players that you're probably bringing back on your practice squad, though a few of them may be told to stick around just in case for a couple days, just in case something happens on that practice squad. As you get to your next day, most teams are splitting up their cutdowns between 2 days, maybe in 3 days, perhaps about 15 on the first day, get down to 75, and then go from 75 down to 53 on that second day, where those conversations are even tougher to have because these are the guys that were a part of that group truly competing for the back end of the roster. With those players, again, the conversations with the head coach, GM, position coach, whoever it may be, tend to be a little bit longer. Maybe the whys, the what our plan is for you. Hey, it's not going to be now. We need to do this with our roster. You're going to be a practice squad player. Stick around. You're going to be here at noon when we get through the waiver process, because at that point, these players are signing their practice squad contracts and they're ready to get on the practice field to get ready for week 1 to give your team a chance. Again, maybe some of those players end up getting bumped up, as we talked about with that practice squad episode we had just a few days ago, where, hey, you get a couple bump ups during the year. You're going to be one of them. We plan to have you on the roster on week 1. So again, all part of the process, all part of it. Again, it is the tough phone call to make. Hey, so-and-so, bring your playbook in. But it is part of the process. It is part of the NFL. It is the toughest league to make a 53 and to stick around. Again, players that we all expect to make rosters won't. Perhaps they end up with another team. Perhaps they get traded. But again, your 53 for your team probably is going to look different in the next couple of weeks as you continue to get through the season, get your trades, your cut downs, your claims, all that kind of good stuff. More questions on cut down process, hit me up. I am at Right Step ADV. I've been through this process multiple times. Again, it's no fun. Nobody enjoys making the phone calls to players. Even though some of those players might give you a headache sometimes, it is no fun to take their job away, which again, in many respects, is what you are doing. But it's part of being in the NFL. It's part of working to achieve at the highest level. And getting down to 53 is what will allow us to get to these regular season games, which I know everybody is looking for. So hit me those questions at RightStepADV. Tune in to all of our episodes as we continue to get closer to the regular season, both in the NFL and at the NCAA level, with games all over the place as we get into our scouting reports, talking players, some draft room talk, and so much more. So we will be with you next time here on Scouting the League. And in the meantime, we will keep scouting.